Been playing bridge all day?
Since about 1:30.
Good for you.
Did you win?
No, I lost today. I play a lot of bridge. That's about all I can do anymore.
Well, that's good that you
I
did
told
that.
Byron the other day, I said, you know, the two things that I love to do was to travel and to go shopping.
Yeah.
And I can't do neither one anymore.
Well, catch me up on Byron and Gary, because I haven't seen them in so long. I forgot what they look like.
Byron called us one time.
Byron called us many, many years ago.
Well, we were living out in Terlingua.
Oh, well.
He's
okay.
just called to say hi, you know, but how they doing? Tell me what Byron's doing.
Well, Byron lives in Portland,
Uh-huh.
and he's married, and his wife teaches school.
What's his wife's name?
Kaylin.
Kaylin, does he have any children?
No, she had an adopted son when they married.
Oh, okay.
And,
Well, you must be grown.
well, he's 22. But,
Oh, well, he's grown up then.
Well, he's
Yeah.
grown, but they had lots of problems, and
Yeah.
so she couldn't have any children. And when they were talking about getting married, they kept talking about adopting. But then when we found out, or they found out how much of a problem Kelly was, that they decided that they were just as well off, you know.
So what's Byron doing? What's he doing for a living?
He is, well, I don't know what you call it. He's a
Stockbroker.
He's a stockbroker,
Okay.
and now he has his own office.
Own
over in
company?
Portland.
Yeah, okay, great.
And he mainly helps retired people and
Good.
senior citizens with their investments so they won't lose their money.
Whatever happened to Gary?
Well, Gary's in San Antonio, lives in San Antonio,
Okay.
and
So what is the last name?
No.
Grant.
Grant.
Yeah, these are
They're
kids I grew up with and played with right here on this
So
block.
Gary
well,
Grant,
they lived,
okay.
They live just right down the street here.
just a block when they were teenagers.
That's right. We all ran around together.
Mhm. And Gary's wife, you know, left him, and they had 3 boys.
I'll be darned.
And finally, he got the boys back, and he has the boys with him in San Antonio.
And how old are they?
Well, let's see. I don't see them very much. I think the oldest one must be about 22. Then there's one in senior high school,
Okay,
and then
so
there's
they're
one
getting up
about
there.
10.
Yeah. And then the girl was, what was her name?
Margaret?
Yeah, how's Margaret doing?
Oh, she's fine. She lives in their house, in their home right down the
Oh,
street.
she does?
Uh-huh.
Still lives there?
She still lives
How
there.
you
She
doing?
bought it after Shelley died.
Okay.
Well, and she's teaching. Isn't she still teaching?
Oh, yeah, she's
She teaches that.
she teaches ballet, but she also has started teaching preschool over at
she did.
at St. Patrick's.
I'll be darned.
I've been trying to get her to slow down a little bit, but
Did she get married?
oh yeah, she's married and has 2 girls, one 14 and one 10. Her girl this is her first year in high school.
Oh my
That's something.
heavens! I can't
Yeah,
believe
time
that.
just flies by.
Isn't that
It's
something?
fun.
See, I have 3 granddaughters that have finished college.
Finished college.
Luther's 2. Oh no, Luther's one daughter.
You have
Luther.
2 that finished college.
2 that finished college, and Allison will finish next year.
Well,
That's
that's
her last
right.
year.
The only
right.
2 that have finished.
Luther has 2 daughters, and I have 2 daughters.
Oh, uh-huh. So,
And Grant has 2 daughters, but Grant's children are in Jackson, Mississippi, with his
Mhm.
ex-wife.
well, now, they're adopted
They're
children.
adopted, right,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
You know, it's a real funny thing of adopted children. My nephew out in Las Vegas, when he and his wife married, she had a son, and of course Everly adopted him. And when she was down here last week, I was showing her this,
Mm-hmm.
and showing her how, you know, you made up the sheets and everything, and she said, well, what about, what is that boy's name? You know, she brought that up, and I said, well, I was showing her how you run the family tree back,
Right,
you know.
that's what I want to do. I want to do a family tree.
And I said, well, I don't know about an adopted child, because I said, I'm just talking about the bloodline.
Right,
And, you know, as you fill this out, you put your father and your mother, and then your mother's parents, and
Right.
your father's parents, and then their parents, and, you know, on
just
down.
work it on back.
What do you do about the adopted children?
I don't know.
Well, you,
Like I told her, I really don't know what
Do
you do.
you, Melvin?
I don't know, I just started this. I got a new computer program that I can put all this into the computer.
Like if you
And if
put
I can
down
get all the
Grant's
information,
name-
I'll load it in the computer and then I can.
Well,
well, I think you acknowledge them, but you don't go into their
they're back.
background.
I'll just let you, this, have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Helen, didn't I give you one of those?
You gave me one, but I let Luther.
Did Luther take it with him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was gonna get it all organized, and of course, I've never seen it
Well,
since.
I'll do
but
it.
I'm
Luther
sure
won't,
it's
he's too
safe.
busy.
Well, if you just kinda,
Read through that.
of course you have these forms, but I got tired of doing the forms, so I thought it was easier to do it like
Just
I
type
did
it
it
up,
there.
yeah.
And, when my nephew from Charleston was down here, he's kin to the Preers and the Dunns, you know, they're old, and, so he was interested in tracing the Preers back, and
Now,
so,
who are the Preers and the Dunns?
well, they're old settlers here, old, and
Whole family.
then, the woman that, they're all related from, when she came over on a ship, she kept a diary. So the Dunns and the Freers have that diary to go back to. They can just trace their family all the way back to England
I'll be darned.
and to France. And so Dick and I spent our time going to all these libraries, like over at Port Aransas and Victoria and Goliad, and I tried to get him to go down to Brownsville, but I never could get him to go that far. But in Brownsville, you see, in talking to my Aunt Margaret, I knew that her mother was raised in a convent in New Orleans because her family all died from the yellow fever.
I'll be darned.
So she was put into a convent. And how a sea captain met a girl in a convent, I don't know. So we always assumed that they were married in New Orleans.
Right.
But then D.W.'s daughter gave me something out of her
Bubba.
father's paper,
Bubba? I remember Bubba.
and we found out that they were married in Brownsville. And their first 3 children were baptized in Brownsville, because then we got the, I went down and used the computer, you can look all that up at the library.
Uh-huh.
And see, this was where they were baptized in the Catholic Church in Brownsville.
I'll be darned.
So you're
And part of it was
Catholic.
in Spanish, so I had to get a lady to translate it for me.
Oh,
You know, what it said in Spanish. And their first 3 children were baptized in Brownsville. And when they, well, it right in here, it tells you, see, I looked up the census, because you go back and you find that all on that computer disk, you know,
Right,
in
right,
the library.
right.
And the first census that I found was in, let's see,
What's that?
was in 1860 in Cameron County.
Yeah.
And when he, on the first census, he was single. And it didn't give that he had any occupation at
Now,
all.
where did James
Well,
Grant come
now
from?
you're talking
Well-
about the grandfather, our
Yeah.
grandfather,
James Grant
the father.
was
of
my
our-
grandfather.
Right, and where did he move
And
from?
he came from Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia, okay.
Mhm.
So he was one of
He
the...
left there when he was 14 years old.
Okay. What's the story about him being a
Well, he
stowaway?
was-
and all
Well,
that
he
sort of
was
thing?
on a ship when he was, and was a cabin boy.
Oh, a cabin boy. Okay.
And,
Well, what is a cabin boy?
Well, what's the
well-
story I heard about him coming over and there was a shipwreck or something? He ended up on Padre Island out
But
here.
he did end up on Padre, I don't know how he got there.
well,
Did you ever hear that story, or
mm-mm.
Jack had told us that story somewhere along the line?
Maybe.
Maybe he made it up.
Well, how'd he happen to leave the ship? He's a cabin boy, how'd he happen to leave the ship?
Well, that was back in the early 1800s. I don't,
Well, you know, I always heard he was stowaway, but it's immaterial.
I don't know
If
that he
he
was,
were a stowaway,
he
you can
left-
understand he's getting off of the ship.
He
He-
did leave the ship, that, we know that.
he left Nova Scotia at the age of 14.
And about
On the
15,
ship.
he was on the island, wasn't he?
Well,
No,
she
he
turned up.
didn't, he was not down on the island until,
After he got married?
1880.
How old was he then?
He was,
1880?
well, just a minute, let's see, he was born in Halifax in 1825,
Right.
and he left home at the age of 14. And in 1850, on the census in Cameron County, he was listed as single, age 26.
So there's
Well, I
been
thought,
about-
when did he go to the island?
Well, this was in Cameron County. He lived there. That was the first census I found. He was at age 26, and it listed him as single. And then James Grant and Mary Hayes were married in 1852,
Well, that sounds right.
and
What's
their
your mom?
first child, named Edward, was baptized in Brownsville on the 5th of September, and was 17 days old.
Now,
And-
Mary Hayes, she's the one, her family died of yellow
Of yellow
fever.
fever.
And then she was in he went down and got her and then married her, probably.
Well-
Brought her back.
He met her in Brownsville,
So she met-
evidently.
then she
And
must
where
have-
they met, I don't know.
Okay.
So,
How would you love to know where they met?
then the next census was in 1860, and he was listed James Grant, age 33, as a mail carrier. Now this was,
Mail
I
carrier.
found this at the library on that disc,
I'll be
For
darned.
heaven's sake.
and
Born in Nova.
it didn't say in 1860, down on the census, he said he was born in New York. Now this, I just copied this off what he said on the
Right,
on the
right.
census. And Mary Hayes
Grant.
was 30, and she was born in Ireland.
So they got married when she was 30?
No.
No, this was they were married in
1852.
1852.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, who was William?
And William was their second child.
Second? What was the first?
The first one was Edward, that died as an infant.
Oh,
Okay.
I see. Yeah, you did tell me that. I'd forgotten about
The
that.
first one died as an infant. And William, when I picked up this in 1860,
He
William was
9.
9 years old.
Right.
And it said he was born in Ohio. Now this is how crazy this is.
Well, that,
And Mary, their
Uh-huh.
first daughter, was age 4, and it says she was born in New York.
oh,
And Bridget, see, we never did hear about Bridget, but she was age 2, and it says she was born in England.
Well, you think they were traveling around from one place to another,
No.
had these different
no,
kids?
I think that's probably a mistake that you.
I don't.
Is
this-
William your
this
grandfather, Helen?
William.
No,
Is the daddy of your
James
dad?
James is her grandfather.
James is the daddy of her
William
daddy?
is Bubba's granddaddy.
Well, I wanna know how the guy got on the island. When did he first?
Well, she doesn't know.
Well, do you think that that's
Well,
factual information?
In 1880, then the next census was in 1880, and that was in Nueces County. So between 1860 and 1880, they moved to the island.
And they showed him at 60
And-
years old then?
And he was 60 years old then.
And call him a boatman.
Boy, that's different from what we've always heard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I'll look this all up.
Well,
It's
I'm
all on
sure
that
that-
microwave.
I'm sure.
That's wonderful to
microfilm.
get the facts.
Yeah.
And
I think
Mary
a lot
Mary
of-
was 53.
A lot of information that I've had in the past was just
William
hearsay.
25.
You
Mary
know,
19.
just
James
guesswork.
Add
16.
to the story.
Now who's Maggie? Maggie came in later.
well, we always called her Margaret. That was their sister. They had, let's see, there was William and James and John and Edward had 4 boys and 2 girls.
But the girls were older, weren't they?
No,
The boys-
Mary
I
was-
thought the boys were the youngest
well,
ones,
the boys were the youngest.
the twins.
And Margaret, or Maggie as he's listed here, was the youngest, and then the John and Edward were 11 when this census was in 1880. And that was in Nueces County, so they were on the island at that time. Now, but I never could find, oh, and while we were doing all this, gosh, you know, there's a lot of people up there in the library looking all this stuff up.
Oh, really?
And all of those things were busy. I took Margaret because I don't know how to push all those buttons.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made Margaret go up there and work them. And the census, I could not find the census between, see, there should be one between 1860 and 1880. There should be one in 1870. But the
every 10
machine
years.
broke down and we couldn't use it anymore.
Oh,
Okay.
And I never have been able to get anybody to go back up there with me to try to find that census of 1870.
Okay.
Because between 1860 and 1880, I couldn't run down. I couldn't find anything.
Sometimes, yeah, you wrote it down, so they moved to the Mustang Island.
Mm-hmm.
And then that, I guess that's when he became a rancher.
Well,
Started doing a little ranching.
well, yeah.
it says the only mention of the Grants was that William Grant served in the life-saving station at Port Aransas.
Mm-hmm.
His name was on the December 1st, 1880, enlisted again in December the 20th in 1881, then later dropped. Sometime about 1870, William Grant and James Grant took a herd of cattle to the Corpus Christi Pass. The pass was not deep enough for the schooner to pass, so they ran the cattle ashore and slaughtered them, put them in barrels and shipped them to, and shipped them. Let's see, where did they ship them to? They shipped them to Panama.
Oh, the meat?
I guess they dried it somehow.
Well, it stuck them in it said they packed them in salt
Salt.
and shipped them to Panama. And I read in this book where I was looking all this up that whoever received that meat sent them word that next time not to have so much sand in it.
Oh.
But see, they just slaughtered them right out there on the in the sand dunes.
Yeah, sure.
And stuck them in the salt and put them in the barrels and shipped them to Panama. God, wouldn't you hate to eat that meat?
Oh, I would.
Then James' wife died in 1899.
Was that Mary?
Let me think
That
about
was Mary Hayes.
Yeah.
And then he lived with his daughter Margaret in Corpus Christi
Well,
till
now, wait a minute, let's back up on Mary Hayes. How old was she when she died? Can you tell?
Oh,
90, he said, didn't
No.
she would have been, well, she
No.
was, here's the census right here. She was 53 in 1980. I mean, 1880.
let's see,
And
over
she
here, I
died
think
in
I have
what
it
way?
where you can understand
About
it.
10 years later,
Yeah,
so she was in her 60s.
in her 60s.
And they don't know what she died of, did they?
See, I don't have my glasses, but this is the way you fix that family thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it all depends who's making it out.
Betty Luther?
It's okay.
Yeah.
Carry on, yeah, okay.
And it tells you right here, you know, the date of the birth and the date of the death. So Mary Hayes, see right here,
Mm-hmm.
it says when she was born and when she died.
She died 1899.
And she
She
was born.
1830.
Uh-huh.
So what was that? 1830 and 1899. Who's
It'd
good?
be 69.
69 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
She lived pretty good.
she lived a pretty good life, but you know, life was probably a little harder on women
Well,
back then. than
was
it
there a
is
big
nowadays.
difference, you think, Mary, between Mary Hayes and her husband, our grandfather? Were they close in age?
Well, let's see, Captain James Grant was born in 1825, and she was born in
1830.
1830, so there was 5 years difference.
well, that sounds right.
Yeah. He was 5 years older than she was. That's about right.
But, see, this way you can start out, and then if you can go back any further than Captain James Grant's father was Captain William Grant. But, see, I don't know anything about Captain William Grant, so.
You know, you can go up to the Mormons up in Salt Lake City, have that huge library,
Mhm.
and they'll let you come in and use it. And we went to visit. It's quite a place, and you can look there. You can find it because they have records from all over the world, all over the world. It'd be a fun trip to go up there and take this information and see if you could go back a little further.
When we were in Salt Lake, we went to this, what do you call it?
It's a library.
And we found Mary's father in there, and she was married to
Let me see this.
Ada Roberts.
But we couldn't find anything about my father, who he was married to or anything. And he was very impatient with this thing. There were a lot of people in there, and you know how it is, so.
Well, it's like when you go up to the library here, that room is busy up there. People looking, up all those records and everything. You may have that copy.
Oh, thank you.
And,
Well, no, don't give him anything that you need.
well, no.
You have other copies of this?
I have another copy. I had Margaret do that on her computer,
Oh.
and then I took it out to that copying place and had some copies run off.
Great, thank you.
So,
Maybe you can start with that now, then.
Yeah, I will. I'll start with this. And so I got a computer program. It's supposed to be, it's called
Well, you need to
Family
get
Tree.
with Luther.
And you can put all this information in and it'll organize it for you. Then
Oh.
you print it out real nice and neat. So, and I'll get your phone number so if I want to call you.
Well, about all the information I have
it's right here.
is in there, but see, these were the birth certificate, the copy, which I think was real interesting.
That's something all handwritten.
Mary, when you look back, these were compared to modern people, these were very amazing folks, weren't they? You know, when you think of the hardships and the,
and this is where they got married.
and they didn't have much money, did they? You know,
No.
they couldn't, nobody had much money.
He evidently had a boat,
Yeah.
'cause that's,
Yeah.
but,
Now, when did your dad pass away? Your dad was Edward, right?
he died in 1921.
Now, how old were you?
When did your dad die?
My dad didn't die till let's see, he was 72 when he died.
What
would
year?
it have been?
They were twins, right?
Oh, well, my daddy died when Grant was born. When was Grant born?
I don't remember.
Grant's 50 years
Well,
old.
I
50
thought
years
your
ago.
father lived quite a while after Grant was born, didn't he?
Let's see, we got married in
Not
42.
after my first
We got
child.
married in 1942, didn't we? He was
Yeah.
married born 9 months later.
Daddy died in 44,
43.
I think.
43, yeah, 44.
44, and he was 72.
A little after
years
9
old.
months after
But
we
your
were married.
daddy, didn't your daddy die of a heart attack?
Mm-hmm.
And how old were you when he passed away?
I was,
Pretty
that
young?
was not too long, well, that was
Yeah,
right
all
after
you
the
kids were
1919
little.
storm.
Yeah.
I
Either
was in-
before or after?
It was after the 19.
Were you
yeah,
here in the
you lost your
1919 storm?
Mm-hmm.
And you got to enjoy it. I mean, got to.
Didn't enjoy
Oh,
And
it.
didn't everybody get scared to death?
Well, see, our house was right on the water, 'cause they didn't have the bay came right up to the
I
street.
remember.
So you had to leave your house, didn't you?
And, we didn't leave until the water was up to almost coming in the house. It was pretty deep in the yard. And I can remember my dad running in and saying, Ada, that's not rainwater, that's salt water in our yard. Water had
No.
started coming in. And it was so deep by the time that they got some wraps to put on us that it was too deep for it to take us out. So Dad had to run over on Chaparral Street and get some men to come carry us out. And by that time the water was so deep that they couldn't get any further than a building on Chaparral Street.
Crest building.
Crest, we went up over Cresses, and they said, well, we'll go upstairs and go down the back way and get to the post office. And when they got, there was some other people got caught downtown, and there was about 20 or 30 people. They got them all upstairs, and there wasn't any back way out. And so that's where we stayed for 2 days in the hallway. of
Now,
that
how
building.
were you how old were you then?
Oh, I was
Little
about,
girl.
I was
Just-
about 6 or 7.
I bet you were scared, weren't you?
You stayed there for 2 days, that'd be that storm.
Well, all
raged.
that day and all that night, and then it took part of next day for the water to go down.
Oh, okay.
Because you could hear it sloshing on the walls downstairs. See, it came up and it was hitting we were upstairs and you could hear the water hitting downstairs. And it blew out all the windows in the front, so we were in the hall. And my mother came in and she said, well, our house is gone. She watched it wash away.
Oh.
And they lost everything. She didn't have any pictures or anything left of the family.
But we didn't have any clothes,
Nothing.
nothing. Daddy had the ranch and all the cattle were drowned. So in one night, I mean the next day, he was
Wiped
a very
out.
poor man. He didn't have anything but a
Completely
pile
wiped out.
of timber.
So how did he start over?
He didn't because, well, that was 1919 and he died in 1921 before he could, I guess he was working trying to make it
So
come
you
back.
think that strain of having to start over?
Well, I'm sure, you know, when you have 5 little kids and everything is gone, and, you know, it's, I
What
imagine.
killed him, a heart attack?
So how did the family manage after he died?
Well, my mother was a very courageous person. And Dad had a lot of property, but it was all under the bluff. So that we just, you know, she had a lot of vacant property. And when she'd sell off a piece at a time, and then she got a house and turned it into some apartments. And she had some property left down on Chaparral Street, and she turned those into apartments. And she raised 5 children. The time we were grown, well, all the property was gone, because, you know, every time,
She'd sold off a little at a time.
a little at a time, she had to. I mean,
Now, whatever happened, now, how many, you had brothers and sisters, whatever happened to all your brothers and sisters?
they're all gone except me.
You're the last one?
I had 3 brothers and 1 sister. There were 5 children.
5 children.
So what professions did the children go into?
What?
What professions did the children go into?
Well, let's see. Margaret taught dancing.
That I know, and. let me
Gordon,
see. Well,
came out of college and went into the war and was killed in England.
That's right, he was killed in a plane crash. Right?
Well, in a bomber. He was killed over Germany.
And
And, let's see, Clayton,
well, he was with the newspaper for years.
well, I don't know what he did before the war. He was in the army, and then he started a sand and gravel business, and, then he,
He worked for the paper, didn't he?
and then he worked for the Caller Times. He was working for the Caller Times when he
passed,
died.
he passed away from cancer, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Right, I remember that.
Mm-hmm. They lived on Manitou Street.
That's right, I remember that part.
Mm-hmm.
And your brother that I never did really know well, but I used to hear from talking about was Lloyd. And he died early too.
He died when he was 32.
What did he die from?
Well, he died from a bloodstream infection.
Oh, really? Probably something they could cure today.
Oh, yeah, they could.
They would have cured it if he.
They flew, in fact, they had just put this on the market, and they flew it into Corpus, but it was just too late. He was too far gone.
No fool, you mean they had some medicine that might have cured him, but he didn't get it?
Well, it had just come on the market for,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
and
bad luck, isn't it?
and the doctors had it flown into Corpus, and but he was just too far gone. So, you know, that.
32 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But you see his son all the time, don't you?
Yeah, one lives in Las Vegas and one lives in Shreveport.
Had 2 boys.
You know, it was real funny. I had 3 brothers and 1 sister, and the 3 boys had children, and Margaret and I didn't have any children.
Mhm.
And not any 3 brothers lived to raise their own children.
So did you help raise them?
But
Did you help raise them?
no, only, well, I helped with my niece, and I helped with Byron and Gary as best I could. Byron and Gary were in junior high school when their father died. You know, that's the worst
Yeah, I
age
remember,
in
I
the
remember
world.
when he died.
Mhm.
It was a big deal.
That was the worst age for, you know, to leave teenage boys.
Oh, yeah.
Cause Luther used to run around with Byron, they were like this.
Oh, yeah.
They were buddy.
Yeah, they nearly drove me crazy.
Well, he's gotten all kinds of mischief.
I was after them all the time.
I'm driving around
Looking for
The little rascals.
Yeah.
They'd come over to, I had a swimming pool in the yard at the time, and they'd come over there swimming, and I had a phone out in the room where they dressed,
Mm-hmm.
and of course I had one upstairs, and that's where I picked up a lot of what they were doing. They'd get out there on that phone, they didn't know I was listening upstairs. I'd hear them making these arrangements on the phone, then I'd take in after them. Mhm.
Oh,
Well,
dear.
Gary's a
Well,
little
they
bit of a
turned out
rascal, too.
fine.
Well, you know, now I hope I'm being facetious, and I'll be serious also. As far as you know, there was no criminal elements in any of this family, were there?
Oh,
No,
no.
nobody,
Nobody.
this is something to be proud of. They
Not
saw,
that I
they saw
know.
disaster, but they went on and lived normally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jack used to say, oh, well, let's go check up on our family, because there might have been pirates in there we don't know about.
My husband used to just razz me all the time. He said, I'm sure that y'all are kin to, what was Jean Lafitte, the pirate.
Now, what would you say the predominant nationality is in this family you've been talking about? Is it Irish, or is it English, or Scotch-Irish, or, you know what I mean? What's the predominant?
Well, the Grants we know came from Scotland.
Scotland.
And evidently Mary Hayes came from Ireland.
Scotch-Irish.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
nothing,
what
that's
I've
one of the best of all, isn't it?
That's what I've always heard, it was Scotch-Irish descent.
Now, have you been back over to England? I mean, have you been over there?
Mhm.
You have?
One summer, Everly, he and his wife, I met him in London, and we rented a car, and we drove all over England, and we drove all over Scotland.
On the wrong side of the road?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And bed and breakfast deal?
Well, we didn't stay really in any bread and breakfast. Marlene kept wanting to stay in a bread and breakfast, and I kept reminding her she couldn't get any ice in those places. We had a terrible time. You know, they just give you one little cube of ice. But we looked up a lot of, we even went to a town that was called Grants on the Spey. And they had a,
We passed through there when we were in England.
Oh, did we?
Mm-hmm.
And what,
Correct.
is that where James came from, you think?
well, I don't know where he came from. I know that they came from Scotland to Nova Scotia.
They went from Scotland to New Scotland, then over here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was anybody from Wales?
Not the Grants.
No, the grandson. And Mary, did you find anything out about Mary, where
No, and going back down and reading a lot of this, it was real funny. The people that came to Texas from Ireland, and a lot of them came from Ireland. That's why, you know, that out here west of town they have that Irish settlements, you know.
Yeah.
And it's real funny. They didn't come into to Corpus Bay. It came into Rockport, and that's why at that time, because a lot of that must have filled up, because those ships went up the river to Goliad. That's why so much of that country was settled, you know, before this part of it was. It's real interesting to go back and read a lot of that history of how, you know, people came and, up around Victoria and Goliad and Refugio would settle more than Corpus Christi, and that's part of it.
And all of Mary's family died from the yellow fever, so she was left alone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something. I wonder how many people were in her family. No telling, huh?
No.
We don't really know much about her.
I said I wished I had listened more to Aunt Margaret when I was growing up, but you know, when you're young, you don't pay attention to what
I
older.
never asked any questions, nobody told me anything, I mean, I just grew up, you know.
Yeah.
Are
Now
you
my,
about the same age?
huh?
Are you about the same
I'm
age?
70,
I'm a little
Nice.
older than Helen.
So how old are you?
I'm 79.
She's 40 and holding.
Yeah, that's what we are. We're 40 and holding.
A little bit.
I hate to tell you how old I am.
Well, it's how you feel what's important.
That's exactly right. How old do you
Well, I
feel?
tell you, I think that you and Helen and you ought to be proud of your heritage.
Well,
You know, when you make comparisons, a lot of people don't have this fine. And listen, I love Scotch and Irish. I mean, all my literature and everything, and the people. I never have seen a bad Irishman. But I haven't been to Northern Ireland yet.
Yeah.
when
They
I
fight
used,
up there, don't they?
when I used to go to Charleston, and Dick's wife told me one time, she said, "You shouldn't keep telling him he's from Scotland." She said he doesn't like to be called a Scot. And I said, "Well, I'm just sorry about that, but that's where his family, my grandparents came from, was from Scotland." And were you all in Scotland?
I know we went
No, we
to,
just went to England.
just went to England.
This is the last year,
That was a very pleasant trip. We had a good time.
they were over there about
10
10
days.
They
days.
went with some people who'd been there before and knew where to go.
Oh,
And they did this other gentleman did all the driving, so made it easy.
Yeah,
on
it's
them.
difficult to adjust yourself. To
well,
what
see,
they're doing.
Edward Lee and his wife lived in Nassau, and so they were accustomed to driving on the wrong side of the street.
Right.
And so it wasn't any problem for him to, drive over there.
Yeah, I didn't realize that they did that in Nassau. We were in Nassau, in the Bahamas.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, they go on the wrong
Yeah,
side of the
that's
street too.
That's right,
They speak with an English accent over there too.
that's right.
Edward Lee and his wife lived down there for about 3 years. And I used to go down there and visit them when they were in Nassau. But they didn't like it. They were happy to get back to the States.
Hmm.
But,
Well, now, see, Mary is able to trace the background of your mother, and I don't know a thing about where my mother came from, or
well, I had a cousin who went into all of that, and my mother's people came from England.
yeah.
They came from England to Detroit. How they ended up in Detroit, I don't know.
Her mother came. Her
No,
mother.
my mother.
No,
that's
do you know?
Mary.
Do you know anything about her mother?
Mm-mm.
What about the nationality? What is was it Peak?
It was her maiden name.
Peak, P-W-E-K? Do you know anything about that nationality? Isn't that interesting?
But I bet, did you ever go down to the library and look that up? If you ought to get Luther to take you down there if he knows how to work those things.
Well, I have a neighbor here that works
It's an
on
expert.
genealogy.
Oh,
I could probably get her to help me on it, but she's been in bad health and I just kinda hated to ask her.
Mhm.
Maybe she wouldn't feel like going down there.
when I first started going down there, Dick was here, and he was the one that was so interested in all that, and we were the ones that, went all around the libraries in all these different places.
Now, who's Dick?
That is my nephew that lives in Charleston. His father was the one that was killed over Germany.
Oh, it's
Oh.
Gordon's baby.
Yeah, Gardens.
Hmm.
And his wife married again, and married somebody that was down here in the Navy, and of course, when he got out, they went back to Charleston to live.
Right.
And, but, he was the one that We just kinda went all around the country going to these different libraries and looking
Well,
stuff
you were
up.
fortunate to have somebody that was that
Interested enough to
interested
help
to
you, yeah.
drive you around.
Well, he was more interested in it than I was. I was just kinda keeping up with him. But he was the one that was really into it.
Have you talked to Betty Armstrong?
No, I
lately?
haven't.
I haven't either. I don't know whether she's picked up any more information or not.
But who's Betty Armstrong?
Well, she
That's
is the
DW.
daughter of Bubba,
Yeah,
you know.
I remember Bubba Grant.
You know, Mary, my father's folks are from Wales.
Now, Bubba, how did he
My
fit into this
daddy's
picture? He's
grandfather
the son
left
of-
Wales.
Bubba is the
Keep
son
going to a
of
debtor's
William.
prison. You know,
Oh,
they put
William,
you in
okay.
prison if you
Yeah.
owed money.
Mine?
And he ended up in Texas finally.
Are you gonna try to get that on the computer?
I'm gonna try to, yeah.
So your father's, ancestry is from Wales.
Right. What a mixture here, huh?
Well,
And I don't know about my mother.
So how
I
many
know some
children-
French, a little bit of French, but I don't know. Isn't it amazing we don't know anything about our...
Well, I think, people are getting more interested in the background.
Well, it's
From
fun,
this-
it's curious.
From the,
Yeah.
show Roots.
What
Roots
about-
started all this. Did you see that show, Roots?
Roots,
no, I didn't see
It
it.
was the story of the colored people
Yeah.
and how they got over here and how they traced back where they came from. Terrible picture, but sad.
You ain't seen nothing yet. Wait till Symptom
Now, how many-
is over.
how many sons did William have? He had Bubba and who else?
No, William, oh, he had two. He had, D.W. and Evelyn.
Oh, I forgot
Eva.
about Eva.
D.W. is Bubba.
Bubba, okay.
Bubba, and Bubba had a sister called Eva.
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 I'll never forget Bubba as long as I live.
Nobody ever forgets Bubba.
God, what a character. I like that
He
man. He
was.
was such a
Well,
nice
he
guy.
was very friendly.
He was so
He-
friendly.
Yeah, he was real friendly.
You want
And he was smart.
Street smart.
Now, he was smart, but he, in a bluff kind of way.
Well, I meant smart to making money.
Oh, yeah, everything he
now
did.
now Bubba had a son, and his son's still a rancher, isn't he?
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
he's still
Yeah,
around.
he's still ranching, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Following his
But
father's
he's not
footsteps.
anything like D.W.
Never
He would
was.
never, do you think he was?
What do you mean?
Well, they're not alike, Helen. The son doesn't follow in Bubba's ways.
Well, Bubba was the kind of guy who never got dressed up and never did go any place and never did spend any of his money. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Well, I don't, what's the son's name? It's a nickname.
Douglas Jr.
Well, we'll call him Douglas Jr. His name is Douglas. He kinda never gets dressed up either.
Oh, doesn't he? I didn't know him at all.
I
I
mean,
didn't-
he's always in work clothes, you know, and here they're probably millionaires.
Mm.
You'd think he'd kinda get dressed up once in a while, but he's very friendly and sort of a kind.
You know, one
type
thing
of
that
person.
amused me, Bubba would brag about how he would go and buy some, like a Lincoln, and then he would deliberately make it look old and not like a Lincoln.
No, you
But he'd
can-
get the engine supercharged so that he could outrun anybody. And then when somebody would pass him, then he'd blow in his horn, he'd go roaring around at 80 or 90 miles an hour. He loved to tell stories like that. But he pretended to be real poor.
You
Yeah.
knew Iris died, didn't you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, who was Iris?
Iris was the wife of Bubba.
She ended up in a rest home,
Oh, she did.
Trinity
Oh,
Tower.
I guess she was real old,
She was
huh?
living in Trinity.
That was a
Tower.
real nice rest home, like
Yeah.
Howard.
Well, yeah, well, I said rest home, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a,
It's a retirement.
it's a
place.
retirement center, but it's
Is that
got-
where Jack passed away?
Yeah.
In Trinity Towers?
that's where we're probably gonna
Was
go.
Jack at the towers?
Hmm?
Jack wasn't ever at the towers.
Yeah, he was.
He was?
He was on the second floor in the hospital for
The
about
last
8
6 or
months.
7 months before
I
his
didn't
death.
know that.
Yeah. He insisted that he be taken away from Ruth.
Oh, really?
And
Yeah,
we-
they didn't
And,
get along with
and
each other.
Mary, you know, just a short time before he died, he was semi-conscious, you know, he'd have spells of consciousness.
Uh-huh.
He was mumbling, and we didn't hear it,
Oh, golly. His
somebody heard it,
brain was-
said he kept saying graveside. You know, he knew he was dying, and he wanted a graveside ceremony.
Right.
You know, you've heard of a graveside. They
Yeah.
don't have a church ceremony. You
Yeah,
come,
just-
and they gave him, that was the way the
That was
funeral
it.
was. And you know, that's not a bad deal. I like that idea. It was a real beautiful
I
thing.
sure did like Uncle Grant, Jack Grant, he was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
He used to take me down to the ranch with him when.
Did he build your home too?
Jack built this house.
Built this house, but not Mary's. Mary's.
Oh, no, I live in a house that's 100 years old.
I'll bet you do.
It's an old house.
On
Well, it's
Ocean
better than some of the
Drive.
new ones.
Oh, on Ocean Drive.
Yeah.
Are you across the street from the ocean or?
Across
right on
the
ocean?
street.
Yeah.
Mary,
Yeah.
I often wonder when I pass your place, I always kind of look over there. I never do see you out front or anything. But those trees are getting so big,
Oh.
you
It-
can't see the water, can you?
You know, last spring, I had all of those trees cut back,
Did you?
front and back, and now they're up higher than ever. I was looking at them the other day, and I thought, well, I'm gonna have to have men. I argue with those tree people because they won't cut those trees like I want them. The one in the back, I kept telling him how I wanted it cut, and he said, no, that'll ruin the tree, and I said, well, I've been cutting it that way for 50 years, and he hadn't ruined it yet, and no, you can't cut it that way. And I said, well, that's the way I want it. And so he went up there and looked around up at the top of the tree, and he came in and said, I'm not gonna cut that tree like that.
Who was that guy?
Well, I don't know, his name was in the
What? He
for
was-
tree service.
Oh, tree service.
And I said,
Wow.
well, if you won't cut it the way I want it cut, we don't have anything else to say then. He said, okay, so he packed up his things and left.
Well, I'm surprised that, people who carve on trees probably don't worry too much about salvaging them.
Well, then I got another fella, and he was they don't wanna top them. They wanna just cut from underneath and just let it grow up as tall as it
Oh,
wants.
yeah.
And I said, well, I don't want them so tall.
Yeah, but you
But-
can't see the water, it gets
But,
too tall in front of you.
Anyway, that one there on my
She
front
lives
porch,
upstairs.
it's just all out of proportion. Helen, I'm gonna hand that to you, so I'm gonna do. That, I wanna give you that letter, that was sent to me, by the, Presbyterian Church.
Oh, what is it?
It was money that Zatella gave the church,
Oh, really?
and, they, fixed the room up at Mole Ranch
Oh, really?
in your mother's name.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And they sent me that letter, and I found it, several months ago, and I kept thinking I'd send it to you or bring it by.
Now, you wanna put this with your stuff?
What's your
Well,
mother's
yeah.
name?
Put it,
Blank.
Yeah, I'll put it with everything here.
Blanche
Yes,
Grant?
Your mother's got a collection of pictures and stuff. She's
I'll
got
put it
pictures
with-
of you and your dad and, you know, her dad together when they were real young. They looked like cowboys. They had mustaches and
Well, I gave you,
Yeah,
some
you gave me a
pictures.
copy.
I
Sure
had
they looked like from an old Western movie.
I had those pictures copied and gave them to Mary, 'cause see, Mary lost all her pictures during the
Yeah, I didn't
war.
have
I
any.
mean, during the flood, during the storm, the 1919
Yeah.
storm.
Well, we've been lucky, we haven't had a hurricane yet.
Oh, don't mention it.
Yeah, you always get, being on Oceanside, you get it full force
Well-
every time, don't you?
I guess actually, since I moved back over there, we really haven't. I have had the outside blinds put on, and I have shutters to put up, but thank goodness I haven't had to do it yet. I have promised Margaret. I said, well, I'm not going to stay there when a hurricane comes. I said, you know, they always get in their cars and everybody leaves town, just Byron and Margaret, and they just take off. And so I said, I am not going to leave town. I said, you get out on that highway and it takes 7 or 8 hours to try to get to San Antonio.
That's true,
And then you have trouble getting a hotel room.
yeah.
And I said, so I am not leaving. You're just as safe in Corpus as you are anyplace else. And Margaret said, well, I don't know. She said, I just don't know about that. And I said, well, I'm not going to go. I'll find a friend that I can go stay with. I'm not going to stay in the house by myself. but I'm gonna find somebody out in south end of town and stay out there. And she said, well, we're not leaving town without you. And I said, well, I don't know what we're gonna do, 'cause I'm not going. And she said, well, we'll just give you a tranquilizer, throw you in the back of the van and take off, and you won't even know it.
Listen, when you see Byron and Gary, tell them hi for me.
I sure will.
Tell 'em everybody's doing good, you know, we're all just making a life for
Well,
ourselves.
where do you live now?
We live in Burbank, California.
Where the
which is
Simpson trial is.
Oh,
Yeah, we're in Los Angeles.
in Los Angeles.
We sell real estate.
That
We're
makes
real
you
estate.
famous.
Oh, you in the real
Yeah,
estate?
both of us together.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
we have our share of natural disasters too.
Yeah.
Oh,
They were
Yeah,
there
Danny
doing
tells
that.
me you sold real estate for
Oh,
some years.
yeah.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, well,
After I stopped teaching dancing, I looked for something else to do, and I tried everything. And I would, after I'd learn it, it would be so boring, and so then I'd look for something else. And I finally got in the real estate business, and that really fascinated me. I really loved it. And but then, you know, gosh, it got so complicated, you know.
it did, they made it complicated.
And you know, you write and then you couldn't ever get the buyers when they actually bought a house. For the next 2 or 3 years, they'd keep coming back, you know, fussing about this or that or something else. And I thought, you know, I said, well, when I turn 65, I'm just gonna quit. And
So you taught dancing too.
mhm.
So
Well,
you
you know,
got
dancing
family
work-
of dancers.
You know, my daughter Anna is just, you know, she's gonna study dance for the next 2 years.
Well, great.
There's probably a gene in there that's running through the family.
She's a graduate of New York University in
Right.
the arts.
And
Oh.
she's studying at one of the finest dance studios in New York. She loves it.
Well, Margaret, you know, she teaches ballet
Where did she study?
at Texas University.
That's great.
You know, my
And Janice is a dancer, so there's a lot of dance
Yeah,
genes
and
running
Janice
around
is
in our
teaching
family.
it, too.
Yeah, Janice is teaching.
and Margaret's 2 little girls both dance.
That's
So,
lovely.
mhm.
Well,
But
if God made anything better, he saved it for himself.
yeah. Oh, but
Well, you can't make a lot of money teaching dancing, I'll tell you. They don't
But it
pay
sure
that
is a lot of pleasure.
much.
Well-
You might if you owned the studio, but, boy, if you don't own the
What type of
studio-
dancing did you teach? Ballet?
ballet.
Yeah.
I taught ballet and tap. Well, you know, years ago when I was teaching dancing, you taught everything.
Right.
Of course, now people don't, you know, you either teach jazz or ballet or, you know,
Right.
you don't mix them all up, but when I was teaching, you taught everything.
Does Margaret
Did
have her
you,
own studio?
No, Margaret's not inclined that way. The reason she's going out to Texas A&M she wants to be certified as a school teacher.
Good.
Because she said Mrs. Suick isn't getting any younger, and she said, I know she thinks she's gonna turn that studio over to me, and I don't want it.
Well,
Margaret
it's a big
does not.
responsibility.
Margaret just does not want to.
The responsibility of a business. She don't want a business.
Have you
Yeah.
ever watched any line dancing that the kids are doing now? Line dancing?
That's where everybody that's an amateur gets up and does a little pattern with it.
And they
Country
just
western
zigzag down the
like
room, you know, just like this
Oh.
and back like this. It's little two-step steps.
I don't guess so.
But all the young people are doing that. They go out to the bars without a date, see,
Oh.
and they drink 2 or 3 beers, and then from then on, anything can happen.
Did you have your own studio?
When I was teaching, I did. Not here in Corpus. I taught in Alice, which is about a little town about 50 miles from here.
Uh-huh.
And my sister had a studio here. And
Well, Anna will be
So-
glad to know she comes from a long line of dancers.
So what is your married name?
my married name was Grabowske. But see, when I was in the real estate business, I've always been in some kind of business, and when I was in business, I always used my own name, Mary Grant, because I always
Easy
felt
to remember.
like that. Well, if John and I couldn't get along and we disagreed, I didn't want to have to, you know, fool with changing my name so many times, so I just used my own name all the time in my business. And my
Well, that
married
probably
life,
helped you out in Corpus because, the Grants were well known here.
that was another thing. I was known, you know, Margaret and I taught dancing for so many years, so people just knew me by the name of Grant. And my husband's name was very difficult to pronounce. It was Grabowske.
What
And,
nationality is that now?
that is,
Polish?
Polish.
Polish.
And I know when I first started in the real estate business, I was gonna use my married name. And one lady had called up one time and with this office that was, she said, I wanna talk to that lady that has that real funny name. I thought, well, you know, this isn't gonna work. I'm gonna use a simple name of Grant. And if I go to charge anything at the store, nobody could spell my name. So I thought, well, you know, when you have a simple name like Grant.
Grant, it's so easy to spell.
But then one time, I was in the hospital and, the doctor told Byron, he said, I wished your aunt would decide what name she's gonna use. He said, we thought we lost a patient and said, we just turned that hospital upside down.
Looking for you.
And said, we found out it was one and the same person. So he said, make up your mind. And I said, you know, if I wanna chew somebody out about something, I use the name of Grabowske.
Right.
And if I wanna be nice, I use the name of Grant.
Right.
So it's
You
convenient.
chew them out, they never find you again because they couldn't remember your last name.
So sometimes it's just kinda convenient to have two names. Oh.
Grandma.